Today our speaker is Gina Fresquez. She is a lifelong horse enthusiast with a passion for helping horse owners make sense of equine nutrition. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Animal Science with a focus on the equine industry from the University of Arizona, and then went on to pursue a master's degree in equine nutrition. Following graduation, Gina was able to pursue her passion for equine health by becoming an equine nutrition specialist for Purina Animal Nutrition. Gina works closely with horse owners, barn managers, and veterinarians to determine appropriate feeding rations and address nutrition-related challenges so that each and every horse can reach their full potential. Gina is also the founder of Gina Wellness, a holistic health coach practice where she helps busy horsewomen double their energy, boost their focus, and love their bodies so that they can go and have more fun with their equine partners. Today, she's come to Equine Tacoma Hospital to discuss some of the basics concerning properly feeding your horse and to answer any feed-related questions that you may have. So if you guys could welcome Gina.
Great introduction. I really don't even have to introduce myself, so that's awesome. That is my old mare, 27-year-old mare that I'm going to talk about senior horses in a bit. So if you have a senior horse, you know how you feel. We've had her since she was 4, and I've been riding her whole life and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to go over the basic equine nutrition. We're going to go over kind of feeding different classifications of horses, just a few. Again, we can't get into every single one of them. Care of the senior horse, because that's one that's usually a pretty hot topic, and then supplementing the diet and what that really means. Okay, so we're just going to move right through. So I usually like to get started and talk some basics when it comes to equine nutrition so that we're all on the same page. So whether you have an extensive background in it or maybe this is even your first time hearing it, I'd like to just cover a couple things. So we look at the horse's digestive tract. It's actually very different than a lot of other animals. And most of the time people think that it must be very similar to a cow or cattle, because on the outside we feed them very similar things, right? If you have cattle, have experience with cattle, we're putting them out on pasture, we're feeding them hay, we're feeding them grain. But actually on the inside they're very, very different, and so there's some things we need to consider and why we feed them a little bit differently than cattle. Also differently than dogs. Dogs are monogastrics, are actually the same as us, and pigs and things like that. So humans, pigs, dogs are all very similar. Cattle are ruminants and horses are hindgut fermenters. And so you can kind of see there's some big differences going on there. With cattle, the majority of their digestive tract is in the front, in the foregut, okay? And there's not a whole lot going on in the bottom part. Whereas horses, their foregut is very small, and most of the majority of their digestive tract is in the hindgut. You can see it from up there. And so they kind of almost are swapped. And the biggest difference is where they digest all that hay and forage that you're feeding them or that they're eating. Because that makes them different than the monogastric or the dog or us, right? We don't eat tons of hay and tons of fiber, right? The fiber's good for us, but a little bit in a different way. So as you can see, there's not much going on here because they don't need to digest all that fiber. So for an animal to digest all that fiber, it needs to be done by fermentation. And so fermentation takes a little longer. It needs kind of a big fermentation vat to have that done. With cattle, it's right at the beginning. So right after the esophagus, it goes right into the rumen where all that forage and hay gets digested by fermentation. Whereas in the horse, it actually, the fiber and hay has to go all the way through the stomach and small intestine to the cecum, the slug-looking thing up there. That is where they digest all their forage. And so the biggest difference is cattle, the hay goes right into there and starts being digested. And so the quality actually doesn't have to be as great, or if there's any molds or mycotoxins or anything like that, the little microbes in fermentation will get rid of that and not be absorbed. Versus with horses, if they say did eat some mold or some kind of mycotoxin that's in the hay, it actually has to go through the stomach and through the small intestine before it gets eaten up by the microbes in the fermentation vat. So there is possible chance of toxicity because the small intestine can absorb those kinds of things. So that's why we actually pay a little bit more close attention on the quality of the forage for horses versus cattle. If you've ever heard like cow hay versus horse hay and things like that, that's why. And that's why we really want to pay attention to not feeding moldy hay to horses. We want to kind of reserve the quality hay for the horses versus the cattle. It's not because the cattle don't deserve it, it's because they actually can handle it a little bit more than horses. Okay. And then cattle, you know, or dogs and us are very simple. They actually have this little, what is this right here? Anybody know? What was it? Appendix, yeah. So they have this little teeny appendix like we do, and it's useless, right? We really don't use it. Maybe at ancient times we used it more when we ate more forage, but that's the same place of where the horse's cecum is. So it's basically they have this very large appendix that is full of microbes and bugs, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So another thing to keep in mind with the horse is, we talked about the foregut and the hindgut. You can tell there's a big difference in volume there. And one thing I like to note is the stomach. The stomach of the horse is very, very small. It can only hold roughly 4 gallons, depends on the size of your horse. So that's not a whole lot, okay, considering the whole volume of the whole gut in itself. So what that means is that horses are designed to eat small meals throughout the day. You've probably heard that before, right? And the reason why is for a couple things. They're meant to eat small meals throughout the day because they have a very small stomach. So we don't want to overload it, okay? Now, a lot of people get worried when the horse eats big meals because they think that their horse's stomach will rupture. And that actually rarely happens, okay? It's usually like, oh, the horse got in the feed bin and the stomach's gonna rupture. And that's actually not really true. I think rarely we see stomach ruptures. They're very, very rare. Because the animal, what does stomach rupture mean to the animal? Death, okay? Stomach ruptures, they die, right? So there's kind of these built-in mechanisms so that that doesn't happen. And what that actually does is the stomach is very small, and if it eats too much at one time, it's actually going to empty quicker. So when the stomach gets almost all the way full, about 3/4 of the way full, the stomach actually empties into the small intestine faster. So keep that in mind when you're feeding your horse, because that's one reason why we eat small meals throughout the day, and not one large meal or 2 large meals, is because as it gets fuller, it's going to empty faster, and the more it empties faster, the less digestion is going to take place, right? So if you think about your big grain meals, okay, so if you did feed a big grain meal, grain is actually not evil, like what a lot of people think. It's just where it's digested in the gut. And of course we can get into insulin resistance and all those kinds of things, but just for the average healthy horse, a little bit is okay because it's going to get in the stomach, it's going to mix with the digestive juices, be digested, and get absorbed in the small intestine. It's when we overload the gut with too much that it's going to empty into the small intestine, partially digested, so then all that grain or feed is going to go into the cecum. And the cecum, when it gets grain and starches and sugars, it kind of goes crazy, and that's when you get founder and colic and things like that. So we want to do a little bit at a time. The other thing to know is your horse can't vomit. You guys know that? Horse can't vomit, right? So again, what goes in is going to stay in all the way, the 100 feet, all the way to the end. So it's another reason why we want to pay attention to quality of the feed stuff that's going into them, because it's going in and staying in. You definitely don't want to call the vet for those types of issues. So, and if you do see feed coming out of your horse's nose or mouth, what does that mean? Choke, yes, call your vet, okay? Because that's not your horse, throwing up, okay? And then the last thing to note about the stomach is the horse's stomach is very unique in the way that it's constantly secreting hydrochloric acid, or the stomach acid that's going on in there. So with us and dogs and other animals, we start secreting acid when we walk into the room and smell the coffee and the muffins, right? So we walk in, ooh, it smells good, I haven't had breakfast yet. And so our stomach starts churning, we start releasing enzymes and acid in our stomach. Maybe we start salivating a little bit, right? Before we even eat, okay? Horses are different. They actually are always producing a little bit of acid. And that's because they're originally designed to be grazing small meals throughout the day. So they're actually always meant to have a little bit of food in their stomach, okay? Again, one of those things to keep in mind when you're feeding a horse. And why we say what we say, which you probably hear it all the time, eat small meals throughout the day, right? Why that's so important. There's actually some physiological things going on with the horse and why you want to be doing that. Okay. The other thing too is saliva. So horses, you rarely see a horse drool, okay? And it's usually because they don't start producing saliva until they start chewing. Whereas us and dogs, we're looking at food, we're starting to drool, the dog's drooling as some are probably around here staring at you wanting your food. Horses actually don't start producing saliva until they start chewing. And that becomes really important with older horses, and I'll be talking about that in a second. foregut, it's pretty simple. So the foregut's the beginning part, the esophagus, the stomach, small intestine. It's really not too different than any of us besides those issues with the stomach that I talked about. So you have digestion by way of enzymes and hydrochloric acid and bile, and then you're gonna digest the sugar, starches, protein, fat, and absorb in the small intestine. That's no different than us, okay? So when it comes to starches, sugars, fat, and protein, we want those to be digested and absorbed into the small intestine. The hay and the fiber and other things we want to be worked on in the hindgut, which I'll talk about in a second. So when it comes to those nutrients, we want those to be absorbed in the small intestine. And then microbial fermentation is by way of the hay, so it's digesting the hay and all the fiber in the gut, and that's in the cecum that I talked about earlier. So all that fiber that you're feeding to your horse and all that hay is going down into the cecum and being digested by microbes. You love little Pac-Man, right? So it's basically little bugs, protozoa and bacteria, basically good bacteria in your horse's gut that is eating the fiber. So actually when you're feeding hay to your horse, you're not feeding your horse, you're feeding the bugs in their gut. Okay? And so that's what we're trying to do, is keep those healthy microbes flourishing, just like us, but horses have millions more, billions more than we do. And so they're digesting that. They love fiber, they love starch, okay? But that's kind of a bad thing, because when they get a little bit of starch, like if starch overloads the gut and goes into the cecum, then they actually kind of go a little crazy and they multiply, and then they die off and they become toxic, and that's how you get colic and onitis and things like that. So that's why we want to avoid those kinds of things. So microbial fermentation is really important to understand in your horse, because they're actually getting nutrients. You guys all know that forage is the most feed that you're feeding your horse, and your horse is getting some nutrients out of it. And so really there's heat. If any of you done any fermentation at home, you know that heat is produced. Gas, you all know your horses are gassy, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing, okay, because there's going to be gas produced in the hindgut. Volatile fatty acids, those are actually the energy source that's produced to your horse, for your horse. So when somebody says I'm feeding hay to my horse, and what kind of calories or energy are they getting from the hay? It's coming from VFAs, or volatile fatty acids, which is acetate, butyrate, and propionate are the three most popular ones. Okay, you don't really need to know that. You don't need to memorize that. Just know that that's the energy that your horse is getting from the hay. Okay. And then lactate, another byproduct of fermentation. If you're familiar with fermentation, all these things are pretty normal when it comes to fermentation. And another thing to keep in mind is that there are some vitamins that are produced by the horse. Your B vitamins and vitamin K are all used by the horse and produced by the horse. Okay, so that's kind of nice to know. A good healthy horse can produce those vitamins. What's the other vitamin that you don't need to supplement your horse that they make on their own? C. Yep. So only humans, primates, and guinea pigs are the only animals or mammals that we need to actually supplement vitamin C. So horses, usually we don't need to be concerned about that, except older horses, and I'll get into that in a second. So the majority of your horse's diet consists of fiber and forage, right? I mean, you are all feeding plenty of fiber and forage to your horses. So what does that really mean? So that's kind of everything all lumped together. That's pasture, hay, no matter what kind of hay, so this could be grass hay, it could be a legume hay, it can be your hay cubes, your hay pellets, your beet pulp, and your complete feeds. Okay, so just because it comes in a bag doesn't mean that it's not always a forage. So even hay pellets are considered a forage ration, and so you need to add it to that. I know I've come across a lot of people who I'll ask them what they're feeding, and they're like, oh, I feed 10 pounds of hay. Great, okay, what else are you feeding? Well, I feed 5 pounds of pellets. All right. And that 5 pounds of pellets are the forage ration. So you want to say, well, I feed 15 pounds of forage versus 10 and 5. So that's going to go to that forage ration. So how much hay does your horse need? Okay, usually a question. There's actually a mathematical way to do it. And generally the rule of thumb is 1 to 2.5% of their body weight. Okay? We never want to drop below 1% of their body weight, because they need that much to maintain a healthy gut and maintain that fermentation of those healthy microbes in their gut. We have done the research at our research farm where we were working with overweight horses, trying to cut back and see how much we could cut back. You drop below that 1% for a couple days and almost the whole barn will colic. So that's definitely something that your horse needs, is to maintain at least 1%. So keep that in mind. pretty easy to do the math. 1,000-pound horse is 10 to 25 pounds. So that's why most horse owners will feed 15 to 20 pounds is what we normally see. And then you can feed all the way up to 2.5%. Now, if you have little guys, if you have little minis and ponies, I think a lot of the reason why they're overweight is because you don't know how to feed them correctly. They really only need like if you have a 200-pound mini, 2 to 5 pounds of hay. That's not very much, especially when you're used to feeding a big 1,000-pound horse, which most people that have minis also have horses, so we're not really used to it. So that's why we need to make sure we're measuring it out and controlling what we're feeding our horses. Now I say all the way up to 2.5% because that's how much a horse can really handle. So if you have a thin horse or a horse that you want to be munching all day, we can go up to 2.5% of their body weight. And that's going to just help them munch and keep the calories going. But if you go beyond that, you could create a hay belly, which is not always favorable. Also, it's just a waste. They're probably not even digesting all of it, maybe not even eating all of it, and it can be a waste on your pocketbook as well. So that's kind of where we go. I have come across horse owners that when we sat down and finally weighed it all out, they were feeding like 4% of the horse's body weight, and still the horse didn't even look that great because it was just excess forage. So again, kind of tailored it to what you need. And so it's not a standard 10 pounds, 20 pounds, it's based off of body weight. And so that's usually why I want to know what your horse weighs. So using a weight tape or however you want to use to weigh your horse is a great place to start to determine how much hay your horse needs. And you're going to base that off of the desired weight of your horse. So if your horse is overweight, then you're going to feed it, 1.5% of its body weight based off its desired weight. Or if you're having the horse gain weight, you're going to go what it should weigh, and then we're going to feed it towards that. Okay. Pasture has a lot more water, you guys all know. So hay is pasture when it was fresh and was cut and dried, so the water's been removed out of it. So basically, think of it as 50% water, so the horse has to eat twice as much pasture as they do hay to get the same amount of nutrient content. Okay, that's why when we have nice lush pasture, you don't have to feed a whole lot of hay when they're out on pasture all day. Okay. So I get a lot of questions too about different types of hay, and there's things to kind of keep in mind, but these are very loose, okay, because it really depends on where the hay was grown, the conditions the hay was grown, the time that it was cut, the maturity that was cut. All those things can play a factor. Fertilization, all those things can play a factor in there. You do want to pay attention to the quality, no matter what type of hay you're looking at. But these are kind of some rules of thumb we can kind of generalize with the difference of the two if you're trying to decide which one to feed or a combination. So your grass hays, which are your Timothy Orchard, Bermudas, hay, stuff like that we find out here, are generally going to be lower in calories per pound, kind of standard, okay? But it's pretty wide range. I've tested tons of hays, and it can be anywhere from 700 to 900 calories per pound is generally what I find up here. They're going to be low in minerals, but pretty much all hays are. They're going to be, both are going to be pretty void in vitamins. They're generally going to be lower in protein compared to your legumes. And they're going to usually be pretty high in fiber, so sometimes we get some orchard grass that's a little bit lower, the really fine stone stuff. And then again, it can be all over the board. If you've ever had to get your hay tested or you've worked with different hay growers, it can be all over the board. So again, you're not going to get consistency as much. Legumes, which are your alfalfa out here, there's also clover, but mostly we just find alfalfa out here. Generally has always been high in calories. So every time I test alfalfa, it's always higher in calories. It's usually always over 1,000 calories per pound. So keep that in mind if you're trying to beef up a horse, or if you have an overweight horse, maybe you shouldn't feed it alfalfa. So I use those in different ways because you can change out the calories pretty easily. It's usually always higher in calcium. You might have heard that before. In alfalfa, it's high in calcium but really low in phosphorus, so usually we have to balance for that. Almost always higher in protein, but the protein in hay isn't always as digestible as your supplements and grain because of where it's digested in the gut. So it's digested lower, and I'll talk about that in a second. But again, they can all be very consistent in quality. You probably all see really stemmy alfalfa and really fine stemmed alfalfa.
Can you discuss sugar content of those hays?
Yeah, it is all over the board. Yeah, that's a good question. Sugar content is what you wanted to know. Sugar content is all over the board when it comes to hays. Generally, a lot of people used to think that alfalfa was worse for your horse. They'd say, oh, alfalfa's higher in sugar. That's not always the case. I've actually worked with some barns who were always fed alfalfa, and then they had a horse come in that was laminitic, so they were told to feed grass hay. We tested the grass hay, and it was higher in sugar than the alfalfa they were feeding. So if you have a horse that is laminitic or Cushing's or insulin resistant, I highly recommend you test your hay to get an idea, because it can be all over the board. And unfortunately, sugar in the plant is not consistent just by saying Timothy or orchard and those kinds of things. It's actually dependent on the maturity of the hay, the stage it was cut, and the time of day that it was cut. So for instance, your fresh grass that's just coming up, it's a really young plant, is going to have higher sugar content. It has actually more nutrients in general because it's a little plant, it hasn't grown up. More stemmier, more mature hay tends to have lower sugar and lower everything else, lower calories, lower everything else. And then also the time of day. So the sugar content is highest when it's later in the afternoon in the grass. So unfortunately, out here when farmers are cutting their hay, they're just cutting it whenever it's dry. So they don't really care, unfortunately, what time of day. In a perfect world, we would love our horse hay farmers to cut it in the morning. And then we'd be assured that it was lower in sugar. Unfortunately, they just want to get out there with their tractors when it's dry, so they have to do it any time of day. And a lot of times it is in the afternoon when the sun's been out a little bit. So get your hay tested, and also if you are concerned about sugars, you can soak your hay. And that can actually, there's been a lot of research coming out, soaking your hay for half an hour in warm water or an hour to 2 hours in cold water can decrease anywhere from 5 to 15% sugar. Now that's a pretty wide range. So again, it can reduce some, is kind of the take-home message. Okay. But really great question.
Where do you test the hay?
You can call me, I can come out and test it. There's also Equine Analytical is typically where I like to go. If you go online, and it's called Equi, like EQUI, and then Analytical. You go online and they actually can send you a little package to put your hay in and mail it back to them.
We have those packets.
You have them, great.
About what does that cost?
Generally, it usually costs, I think, it used to be $26, they just raised it to $28 to get it tested. So, all great questions, and hay is definitely a big one. So really, like I said before, we're feeding hay to feed the bugs in your horse's gut, so we're trying to keep those bugs happy. And so you've probably all heard make changes, make it over 7 to 10 or 7 to 14 days, right? You never want to make changes in your horse's diet abruptly or cold turkey. And that's really, it's not for your horse, it's for your horse's gut and the bugs in their gut. And so that's what we're doing there. A lot of times people remember to do that with the grain or supplements, and a lot of times we forget to do it with the forage. And so I just want to keep that as a reminder that when you are switching forage, say you've got a new batch of hay in, maybe you're switching hays, definitely take some time to blend it with the old hay, because again, your microbes are the ones that are dealing with that hay, and they're the ones that are going to need a little bit of transition. Now, some horses are really tough and can handle it, and they don't even skip a beat when you switch. Some horses are really more sensitive. A lot of times when I get calls from people saying their horse got sick or they're colicky and they're not sure, they think it was the grain or they're not sure what's going on, one of probably the second to third question I might ask somebody is, have you gotten a new load of hay in recently? Because even if it's still the same type of hay, it's always been Timothy or it's always been orchard, it may be last year's hay versus this year's hay, and that can sometimes cause a little bit of digestive upset. So that's why mixing it's always really good. Okay. Already talked about this. And then we talked about the stomach, right? It can only handle so much feed at one time, especially grain, because we don't want to overload the stomach with too much grain because it's going to pass it through quickly. And so the rule of thumb is don't feed more than 0.5% of their body weight per meal. Now what that equates to is for a 1,000-pound horse, that's 5 pounds. How many of you feed 5 pounds a day, let alone a feeding? 2 of you. Okay, that's what I thought. So out here, we have really good forage. Our forage has a lot of calories in it, and our horses can maintain a lot. Most of us don't feed that much in a day, let alone a feeding. So I share this information with you because know that you always want to break in your meals into small meals as much as you can, but if it's still under the 5-pound mark for that average 1,000-pound horse, you're still okay. Okay? I know we go, oh, I feed 2 cups of grain, and that's only like a half a pound, and we kind of go, oh my gosh, that's too much. It really isn't. Horses are huge animals and can handle that much. And this is an old standard that has been around for a very long time. So 0.5% of their body weight is the max you want to feed. Now we get into those levels when you have a performance horse that's working really hard and they can't even eat that much hay, so we have to feed them grain to provide energy for the horse. Race horses, really big. It's not unheard of that race horses get anywhere from 10 to 14 pounds of grain a day. Okay, so in that case, they have to break it down. Okay, so if you were feeding 14 pounds, you definitely couldn't do it in 2 feedings. You have to do it in 3 or 4 feedings to be under that 5-pound mark. Okay. Now this goes for your grain rations and your supplements. It really doesn't go for like your fiber. So your hay, your beet pulp, those are all fiber. So you can feed more of that, obviously. We're just talking about the things that have more of your protein, your starches, your sugars, any of your grain type rations. Okay. So a horse can pretty much maintain and survive on hay alone, hay and water. So why would we feed anything else? Well, what I usually say is if you want them to thrive and you're doing performance horses or you're breeding with them or you're doing something else, how do you actually, make them thrive because you want your horses to look amazing and be really healthy as you can. So in horse heaven, they'd be out doing this every single day of the year. And this actually could be horse hell for some horses. Laminitic horses, Cushing's horses, things like that. So this isn't always horse heaven. You'd see grazing muzzles on all of them if that was the case. But this is what we think horses are supposed to be out doing. And in this case, if horses were out in this situation, they really only need a salt and maybe a mineral. And that's probably all they need. So sometimes when you're not doing anything with your horses and they're out in lush pasture, you maybe only need a salt or a mineral, which is pretty basic. But what I want to kind of just touch on is the trace mineral salt block that you all see. You can buy it anywhere. It's just a red block. That is almost all salt. Okay, so if you actually look at the tag before you rip it off with the sticker, read it, look at it. It's about 95 to 98% salt and just a little bit of mineral, and really not even enough to supplement your horse's diet. It just has a few of the trace minerals in there. So I generally say that this is a great salt block. And if you're feeding supplements and grain and put that in the stall, that's fine, it's a salt block. But if you don't do nothing for your horse and you're just feeding it hay, please get your horse a horse mineral. Okay, because this one is not designed for horses at all, it's just an all livestock product. Anything that says all livestock on it means it can be fed to cattle, horses, goats, sheep, sometimes chickens, sometimes pigs. And what they do with those products is they supplement it to the lowest common denominator, and that's usually a sheep. And sheep can have no copper. So if you're feeding something that's an all livestock product, there's no way you're meeting your horse's copper requirement. Okay, so that's just one nutrient. So I usually try to stay away from all livestock products. Those are usually better for cattle and sheep and things like that. So this is great. You can still buy the trace mineral block. Just know when you're buying it, it's like a colored salt block. Okay, it's really for salt, which your horse does need. But make sure there's also minerals that are designed for horses, and they can come in a block too. But they're for horses. And if you're not doing anything else, you're not supplementing or graining your horse does need a mineral. Okay, just like your cattle and your other animals. So most of the time we have horses in this type of situation. So we have horses.
Before you move on, you've seen these new baths, bullion.
The rock salts.
Yeah,
Like the red rocks and stuff like that. Yeah, those are a little bit better. They have a little bit more mineral. They're still mostly salt though. Just like if you're gonna take Himalayan salt, like I take pink Himalayan salt on my food, know that it's mostly salt supplement, or it's providing salt, a little bit of mineral, but still not enough to supplement the diet if you're not doing anything for your horse.
And not enough if you're eating another supplement that you're overloading on.
No, yeah, exactly, and that's why there's only a little bit in there, because if you're feeding a supplement on the side, you don't want to cross and do too much. So it's really only a little bit. Great question though. So we kind of find our horses in these cases, they're either in minimal pasture, overgrazed pasture is more of a turnout, or they're stuck in stalls, especially during the winter. So horses are relying on us for pretty much all of their feed and all of their hay. And so then you need to kind of graduate and go up. So you're feeding your horse forage, making sure it's getting 1.5 to 2% of its body weight, and then from there, they're going to need vitamins, minerals, and possibly more protein and calories. And I'm going to show you how to evaluate that on your horse to know if he needs more protein or calories, because that's the easier one to determine. So for optimal fitness, it depends on what you're doing with your horse. You generally need 5 nutrient groups, which are no different than us, okay? So water, energy, which energy is actually calories. I know some of you go, oh, I don't want to have more energy. It's calories. Calories, okay? Protein, vitamins, and minerals. Okay, so when it comes to energy, it's really calories. We need to find that fine balance where your horse doesn't have too much, right? If they're getting too many calories, they're either going to gain weight or be too hyper, or they're going to have too less and they're going to be sluggish, slow, not perform, or lose weight. Okay? So we want to find this nice balance, and you've probably all heard a balanced diet. Even your doctor's telling you you need a balanced diet. What does that really mean? Well, it means the calories are balanced with the nutrients. So a good balanced diet would be a good ratio of energy to protein, vitamins, and minerals. So the way I think about it is protein, vitamins, and minerals are the nutrient density, and your energy or your calories are what it is, it's the calories. And so sometimes we can have empty calories, right? In our diet, like soda pop, right, is empty calories. And what an empty calorie is all calories and none of the other nutrition, okay? So sometimes I do see that in the horse world. If we feed lots of hay that maybe is not fully sufficient for the horse as far as vitamins and minerals, and then maybe we feed rice bran or oil or something like that, where we're really missing some key nutrients, but our horses are fat and they look healthy because they're not skinny, but they're still missing some nutrient density that's going on there. So the way we evaluate horses is by age, weight, activity level, lifestyle, and body condition score. So these are all things you should know about your horse, right, to determine what your horse needs. And then body condition scoring is something that I teach every time I teach equine nutrition. It's very, very important to know. So this might be a review for you, or it might be something new, so I hope you take this home with you. So energy requirements or calorie requirements are really dependent on what you're doing with your horse, their stage, their activity level, and also their metabolism. So we've all heard easy keeper versus hard keeper, right? So an easy keeper is a horse that I like to say is an air fern, or they just breathe and get fat. They look at hay and they get fat, okay? So they're really easy keeper, really easy on your pocketbook. You really don't have to do much with them. The hard keeper is the one that you just feel like you're always pouring grain to them, you're always feeding them, and they're constantly skinny. They're usually the worriers, the ones that are working harder. Just their metabolism is working faster than their partner next to them in the stall. Okay? And so we're actually going to feed our horses to maintain an energy balance, and the way we do that is through body condition scoring. Okay, this is very important. This is a standard scoring system that we use all across the United States. So it's something that you want to become very familiar with. Your veterinarians use this, nutritionists use this, everybody uses this. So if you've never heard it before, you learned something new. Basically, we score our horses from 1 to 9. 1 is skin and bones, and 9 is completely obese, okay, the fattest horse you've ever seen. And generally, we want our horses between a 5 and a 6. That's a good, healthy horse is between a 5 and a 6. So there are actually areas on the horse that we evaluate the fleshy conditions or the fat deposits on their body. And every horse is an individual, just like we are, and so some horses put fat more on other places than others. We kind of take a cohesive look at the whole horse. And so the places that they can lay down fat is along the neck, at the withers, behind the shoulder, at the ribs, the crease down the back, and at the tail head. And so what we actually do is we evaluate our horses based off of all of this. And so the easiest way to do it is to look at a horse first, and first ask yourself, can you see ribs or can you not see ribs? Okay, that would be a great first question. Now if you say, yes, I can see ribs, even just a few, then they're going to be a 4 or below, so a 1 to 4. If you say, no, I cannot see ribs, they're going to be a 5 or above, so a 5 to a 9. Okay, that gets you in the ballpark. Now the bad thing is in the winter, when they have long hair coats, that makes it really difficult. Okay, but we're saying like with a nice slick coat, this is how you would judge a horse. So the next thing you have to do is actually get your hands on a horse. And so I like to run my hands down the ribs first. So I'm running my hands down with the hair. 5 is when you cannot see them but easily feel them. If you have to put a little bit of pressure, just a little bit of pressure, maybe a little bit of sponginess in between the ribs but you can still feel them, that's a 6. Okay. If you're pushing pretty hard, lots of pressure, okay, you're looking at like a 7. And then if you don't even know if your horse has ribs because you're pushing so hard, then you're looking at an 8 or a 9. Okay, so that's the degree there. Now, generally, if you can just see 1 or 2 ribs, I'm going to call your horse about a 4, and then I'll have some pictures. I'll show you kind of what the other ones look like. So that's a good place to start. And then from there you can work your way out. For the neck, you've all heard of the crusty neck. Horses can get a crusty neck. Sometimes it's breed disposition, but that is just, it's all like humans, right? Those breeds just tend to put fat more in that area than other breeds. Some horses, you can get them super fat and they still don't have a neck on them, okay, a crusty neck. And the way that I like to judge that, it's super scientific. You're gonna grab it, and is it an upside down U or an upside down V? Okay, I know it's really scientific. So you're gonna grab it and feel it, and you can feel the sponginess around it. And so if it comes to a nice V, a lot of thoroughbreds, they don't tend to get, that breed doesn't tend to get a crest neck. So you can see it kind of comes to a point, versus if you had a Morgan or even an Arabian or draft breeds, they'll come to more of a roundiness to the top, okay? Withers is probably one of the least places I see fat, but horses can put fat on their withers. F, so behind their shoulder is another spot to look. That's where my mare puts on weight, so you can almost outline it sometimes, and you can poke it, and you can see the fat, so like right where the girth would go, okay? And the way that I like to test that one is you can poke it, and fat tissue is what? Soft or hard? Soft, right? It's adipose tissue, it should be soft. Muscle tissue should be firm. So what you can actually do is I like to poke on a shoulder and then move back. And when you get to this area, it'll start jiggling a little bit. You can actually kind of see the fat tissue. It's kind of fun. I'm a super nutrition nerd though, so. But what I like to tell people is muscle should be like a well-done piece of steak, and fat will be like a rare piece of steak. So you can kind of poke around your horse and feel the fat tissue, okay? Some horses will get a grease down their back, but again, it just sometimes depends on breed. Some horses will always have a grease down their back. It just depends on the horse. And then some horses you might have seen, they get the kind of the fat around their tail head. Sometimes they get a little dimply around their tail head. Okay? And then you can feel the squishiness there too. So we're going to average all those places out. So for example, if my horse was a 5 on the ribs, but she had a little bit of a crusty neck, I might score her a 5.5. Okay, so you can kind of, I like to start at the ribs, and then the other places dictate whether I go up or down or stay at that number. Okay, and I have some great pictures. Another thing to keep in mind is one body condition score is about 50 pounds. When you read literature, some people say it's 45, some people say it's 70. Let's just give it an average about 50 pounds. So what that tells you, if your horse is a 4 body condition score and you know it needs to gain weight because you want it to be a 5 to be healthy, your horse needs to roughly, gain about 50 pounds. Okay? Or if your horse is a body condition score of a 7 and you want it to be a 5, then it needs to lose roughly 100 pounds. Okay, so that's a good gauge for you to know how much it should lose or gain. So these horses are the ones that are under a 5. These two horses here are definitely your 1s, so when you basically have skin and bone, the horse has, removed all of its fat for energy, and then it's also started using its muscle mass for energy. That's what's going on there. These two horses are about a 2 and a 3. This horse is a little bit more muscle, but again, you can see a lot of its ribs there. Okay? I don't see this too often. I see this a little bit more often, just the slightly thin horse. These are what I usually see out in the field, and the horses are just a little bit thin. Either they're a hard keeper, they're a hard working performance horse, and they're just not feeding enough, or maybe it's a horse that's had dental. I mean, there's so many issues that can be going on there. It could be even just the horse owner doesn't know and isn't feeding them enough. So again, we can see ribs. I mean, this horse is nice and shiny show horse, but you can still see a couple ribs there. This horse needs a little bit more. Okay, you just need to pop him over so that he has a nice coverage over his ribs. This horse, I love this example because he kind of has a hay belly, but he still has ribs. Okay, we can see that a lot. The hay belly is exactly what it is. It's a hay belly. If you were to go and feel that belly, is it soft or fat? And soft or hard? It's hard, right? I mean, it's an extension of their gut. And remember, fat tissue is soft. So just because they have a belly does not mean they're fat. Okay? The belly can be a lot of different things. It can be parasites. It can be a pregnant mare or a mare that had been pregnant in the past. It can be an older horse and their back sags, their belly sags. Okay? It can also be that you're feeding too much forage or poor quality forage. So the quality of the forage that goes down, usually more they have to eat and the harder it is to digest, so it's going to create a hay belly.
So I have a performance horse that I'd like to put a little weight on. And how do I avoid increasing the forage? She needs to gain about 50 pounds. I'd like to put about 50 on her. How do I do that and still avoid hay belly?
Yeah. Well, if you know that you're feeding her an adequate amount of forage, so you've gone back and you looked at how much you weighed out the forage, and you know that you're at least between the 1 and 2%, then you would want to feed something that has more dense in calories, like fat source.
Just like a fat source.
Something that you can put on calories a little quicker, especially for a performance source. That's what I would go for. And we can talk about specifics later. But that's kind of where you wouldn't go forage. You'd go more of the green and the fats and stuff, because that's going to get more nutrient density and not the forage yet. But you got to make sure you're at least feeding that 1%. Yeah, so these are kind of these are like the 3s and the 4s. So they just need a little bit more, okay? These guys are the other end of the spectrum. These guys are the too fat. Again, you can see a little bit of dimpling. Now this horse does have a hay belly, but this horse is extremely fat and has no hay belly at all. So again, they don't have to have a hay belly. This horse, you can't even tell where its shoulder and barrel and hips are. It's like a tube of a horse. This horse looks like he's gonna pop. You can't really see anything either. Now this horse definitely has a hay belly. I'm gonna guess this horse may be pregnant, but that horse is on the internet. This one, I put this up here, this one floats around the internet a lot too. This horse is clearly metabolic, there's something going on with this horse. This is not normal, but you can see this is a good example of the fat pocket, okay? The dimply around the butt. Now this horse is starting to put fat on places that they're not supposed to lay down fat. So those other places we didn't talk about here. They can even start to put fat around on their face and things like that aren't normal, and that means that your horse's metabolism is way out of whack and you need to be working on some things with your vet. But that could be something. This horse obviously has a crusty neck as well. So this is kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for more of your classic horse. Again, I can't touch these horses, but if I was, I would guess that I could not see ribs but easily feel them, so they're between a 5 and a 6. All these horses, no matter what their age, you should basically not be able to see ribs but easily feel them. Okay. So when it comes to energy or calories, again, that word can be used interchangeably. We can get that from starch and sugar, fat, and fiber. We usually don't get calories or energy from protein. And I'm going to talk about protein in a little bit and how you can tell if your horse needs more protein. But that's kind of a misconception. A lot of people used to look at feeds and go, oh, that's too high protein, that's going to make my horse too hyper. And that's actually like totally debunked. That myth is gone, okay? So protein, if you think about it, if you were to go work out or if you just ate a big old steak, how do you feel afterward? You're not jumping off the walls, right? I mean, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to digest for a little bit. Okay, protein is for other things in the body, not for energy. The horse can use protein for energy, but that's when they have nothing else. So they have no carbohydrates floating in the body, they have no more fibers, and that's when they start using protein, and they actually start pulling it from their muscles. That's why you see those skinny horses lose muscle tone, because they have no fat left. So we actually want to reserve protein for other things. The reason why protein got such a bad rap is because the feeds that typically used to be high in protein were also high in calories and starch and sugar. And those are the things that usually make your horse too hyper or too much energy. And so now we're able to separate those. Now we have feeds that are high protein, low starch and sugar, and low protein, high starch and sugar. I mean, we can change it up so much now. So just remember that protein is actually really good for your horse. And it's not really an energy source. So the energy sources, I think you asked me in the back, is like starch and sugar, fat, and fiber. And you can play around with those. It's actually really kind of fun to get the desired outcome of your horse. So depending on what type of energy that you want, you can play around with what type of energy to give it. So starch and sugar is going to be that quick and fast type energy. So if you have barrel horses or a cutter, or maybe I even had a 3-day eventer client who had a big drafty type horse that was having a hard time even getting over the fences on the cross-country course because he was slow. So we actually fed him more starch and sugar to kind of give him a little bit more fire under his butt to get him over the fences, okay? But if that's the opposite, if you're like, no, my horse is too hyper, he's too much energy, but you need to maybe fatten him up, or maybe you even need to have more endurance or longevity in that horse, then you're going to go towards more of the fat and fiber. So I like to use those interchangeably. Now all horses need all of these, but you can switch around the ration to get more of the other. So like I said, it's your speed events, you need a lot of fire under their belly. Quick and fast, starch and sugar is a great fuel source. But if you don't want that, you want kind of that low kind of energy that's going to last, more of an endurance, then you're going to go more with fat and fiber. So you can play around with that with your horse and kind of experiment a little bit. And so fuel sources can affect behavior, so you can manipulate the diet. Again, starch and sugars aren't evil, but you can use them appropriately depending on your horse. Obviously, you can't make a thoroughbred off the racetrack into a kid's horse in 2 weeks just by switching its diet. But you can, switch some things. So if your horse is too hyper, is too, you're not really liking their behavior in that way, sometimes fat can have a little bit of a calming effect. Now I say that very lightly, so take that with a very grain of salt, but you can play around with that. So I like to share this information because everybody always wants to know what the sugar and starch levels are of feeds and also just regular grains. So your cob, let's say, is this yellow band here, corn and oats. Corn, very high in starch, okay, which turns into sugar. So anything with a lot of corn is going to have a lot more of that kind of starchy energy, okay. Oats are over 50% starch and sugar. I say that because a lot of people think oats are the safe grain, and when they're digested and absorbed into the body, they have a lot of starch, so they're not really the safe grain. So if you see a lot of oats and a lot of corn in your feeds, know that they're getting a little bit more starch and sugar. That's not always bad. That's why racehorses eat a lot of corn and oats, okay, because they need that type of energy. But kind of going through, rice bran is another one that a lot of people think is really low. It's actually not really low, it's kind of moderate. That's why horses love it, because there's a little bit of sugar in it. Anything that's like 25 to 20% or lower is considered low starch as an industry standard. But if your horse is laminitis or insulin resistance or Cushing's, generally we're looking at like the 15% or lower. So as low as possible generally in those cases. But your horse is good and healthy, but you want to look for a low starch diet, you're going to generally be this much or lower. So you're looking at feeds generally that are pelleted. So when you take a whole grain and you put it through a pelleted process, it's going to be by default lower in starch and sugar. And then if you have more fat and fiber and less grains, it's going to be lower in starch and sugar. So you can kind of follow down the line. Your seniors are always a lot lower because they're going to have a ton of fiber in it. And then you're getting more into your supplements and your low starch products that are low. Okay, the lowest that you can get in most cases is about 11%. So the next thing is protein. Oh, good
Question. Do you know roughly about what barley falls in?
Barley is going to be slightly lower than oats.
Thank you.
So protein is usually the next thing that I evaluate when I'm visiting with you and your horse and those kinds of things. Because it's the next thing you can tell by looking at your horse. So we talked about body condition score. That's the number one easiest way to tell if your horse is getting enough calories. Again, groceries, calories, what do you need to feed it? And then protein. Because sometimes your horse maybe doesn't need more calories, but needs more protein, and that's actually sometimes harder to do. Sometimes your horse needs everything, but sometimes it needs just one nutrient group. So we talked about this already. Is protein too much energy for your horse? No. Protein is necessary for muscle, hoof, hair growth, enzymes in the body, things that you need protein for. And the way I like to think about it is if you were to go work out, or if you go to the gym and you see those muscle builders, what do they usually do when they get done? They drink a protein shake, right? Because they're trying to actually support their muscles and all those things. Because actually when you work a horse, and so anytime you work yourself or a horse, you're actually breaking down the muscle while you're working it. And then for it to build back stronger, you actually have to be eating the protein to be able to build it back stronger. Okay? So if you worked out and never ate protein, your protein would actually go down, or your muscle tone would go down. Okay? Same thing with horses. So your horse can have a deficiency. There's lots of reasons for deficiency: decreased appetite, poor coat, poor hair coat, poor hooves, those types of things, poor muscle tone, things like that. So what I like to focus on is quality over quantity when it comes to protein. So what that means is don't get so focused on the percentage. We tend to go, is that 10%? Is that 14%? I actually don't really care that much. I really care is what is the protein source and what are the amino acids. And so the number one amino acid that you want to look for in a horse's diet is lysine. Okay? And there's actually over 20 of them that your horse needs. Lysine is the number one limiting, which means they need more lysine than any of the others, and they need lysine to even use the others. So lysine's like the golden nugget, the one that's needed in the diet the most. So I generally tend to make sure that it's in some of the diets. What I like to show people is when you're evaluating your horse, there's two spots on the horse that I like to look. So through the hips and the top line of the horse, which is it's not a great picture. Those two places I evaluate a horse based off of their protein and if they're getting good quality protein in their diet. So if you find that your horse is kind of hollowed out through the hips, okay, and also has more of a ridge on their top line, so So the top line is basically where the saddle ends, right above their hips, where their backbone is. You generally want that to be flat. So if I'm running my hand over the back of your horse's back behind the saddle, you want that to be fairly flat. Now there are some breed differences there, but you want it to be flat. If you find a ridge or a little bit of the backbone poking out, then your horse could be lacking protein. Now, I say could be because they could be lacking calories. If you can also see ribs and that, then you need to do everything. But what I find too often than not is horses, when you body condition score them, they look great. They're a 5 or a 6. But then when you look at those two areas, those are the areas that you're like, yeah, my horse is still thin through there. And that doesn't really mean your horse is thin because I can't see ribs, but maybe you need to focus on those two areas. And I'm going to kind of tell you how to do that. So your horses have an amino acid requirement, not necessarily a protein requirement. And so the other thing to note is that protein digestion in the foregut is more available to the horse than it does, but it's being digested in the hindgut by the microbes, and so it's not actually fully absorbed. That's why sometimes you can feed hay, and your horse still maybe has muscle development issues or hooves, because even though that hay might be high in protein, it's not using all of it. I think that I read an article recently that it's about 30 to 40% of the protein is absorbed in the hindgut from what it's absorbed. Versus the foregut, which is the small intestine part, it's about 70 to 80% of the protein is absorbed. So that's why we supplement a lot of times with protein, with feeds and supplements and things like that, because it actually is absorbed better through the small intestine than through the hindgut. And so that's why sometimes you got to supplement. Now, not every horse is, because some horses are very efficient, and if you're not doing much with your horse, they're just kind of a pasture ornament, you might not need that. But again, evaluate your horse on these areas, and that really can tell you. So more often than not, I come across horses that look great at those two areas, and so I usually put them on a protein supplement. And that usually helps those two areas. So it's really easy to do the math to figure out how much your horse is getting. Again, the percentage is not really telling you anything because you have to multiply how much feed you're feeding. So for an example, I'm using like a ration balancer, which is like 1 pound of enriched, which when you read the tag, it's 32% protein. And so most people go, oh my gosh, it's so high in protein. But the feeding directions tell you to feed 1 pound. So you should just have to do the math. Know that anytime you read a feeding a label and it says guaranteed analysis on it, that's per pound, not for the whole diet. So anytime you see that, you have to multiply all those nutrients out by how many pounds you feed. Okay, that's a really good take-home message. And so you do the math, it's 0.32 pounds of protein, versus if you're feeding a regular grain like Strategy or pick any of them, and it's going to say maybe to feed 4 pounds, you have to multiply it times the amount of protein, and it's actually 0.56 pounds of protein. So that 14% protein diet has more protein in it to your horse than the 32% protein. Does that make sense? Okay. So vitamins and minerals I'm not going to get into because there are so many of them and we don't have time. But just know that your horse requires them. The ones that we talked about they don't need are vitamin C, vitamin K. Also some of the B vitamins, okay, right? They can make some of those in their body. But then some of them like A, D, and E are needed. And then there's lots of micro and macro minerals that are needed. Generally, the macro means that they're needed in larger amounts, micro, small amounts. So calcium and phosphorus is 2 big ones. The rest of these are mostly salt, and then your small ones. So just take-home message is that there's a lot of them out there, and they're all interrelated to each other. So calcium's related to zinc, related to copper, related to phosphorus. See how that goes? It's like a snowball effect. So take-home message is I really highly suggest you don't buy just plain supplements that are just one new vitamin or mineral. So don't just go out and buy, say, I think my horse is deficient in phosphorus. Don't just go out and buy a phosphorus supplement, okay? Because it might have an effect of all these others because they're all interrelated and there's a lot of ratios that you have to keep in place. So really keep it to the professionals as far as making sure you're buying a quality company, you're researching the company, making sure that you have faith in them that they're doing it for you, okay? Because you really, even vitamin E and selenium, which is even up here, those are interrelated, and there's so many things going on there that you just, don't be a chemist in your horse's feed room, okay? So just kind of leave it. Look for something that's generally balanced and that's meeting all your horse's needs. So some of these I've talked about, but making sure the horses are individuals. You really rarely can find one thing to feed all 10 horses or something like that, making sure you're treating them individually. Sometimes it comes down to management. You know, if we have one fat horse and one skinny horse in the same pasture, I'm gonna guess that the fat horse is eating skinny horse's feed, right? And that's usually what it comes down to. And so it's gonna come down to management. You know, if you can't separate them to have them eat, then you might always have skinny horse and fat horse. I mean, there's just some things that you need to think about when it comes to your horses. Feed by weight, not by volume. We talked about scoops earlier before we all started. So there's all these different types of scoops out there, right? And anytime I might ask a horse owner, you know, how much do you feed? We usually say, oh, I feed a scoop, or I feed a cup. And so my next question is, what does your cup look like? Or what does your scoop look like? Because there's so many different ones out there. There's the coffee cans, there's the big open scoops, there's the 3-quart scoops, there's the actual measuring cup, there's the cottage cheese cup. I mean, there's anything that people use as a scoop. And so what I say, it doesn't matter what scoop you use, the best thing to do is just weigh it out, and you want to know how many pounds you're feeding to your horse. So no matter what scoop you use, it doesn't matter, just know the pounds. And usually if you always use the same scoop, you just have to weigh it once, because once you know how much your scoop weighs, you're fine. We actually do have a little scale, a little fish scale that we're going to raffle off today. So you can go home with a scale and measure your grain, and even you can measure your hay and see how much you're feeding your horse. And so what I usually do is you can buy a little fish scale. They're like $10, even a luggage scale, those little ones. And you can put your bucket on there, put your scoop in. You know that your scoop is now 2 pounds, or your scoop is 3 pounds, or 1 pound, whatever it is. I've even had people, if they don't want to buy a scale and they only need to measure it once to know how much it is, they will scoop it out, put it into a plastic baggie, go to the grocery store and in the produce section, put it on the scale, and write it down. That's all you have to do. So it's really easy, just making sure you know how many pounds of feed your horse is getting in the hay as well as the grain. Okay. So we're going to get into just some feeding options for horses, how do you build the best diet. Are some of you like this? You know, you feel like you're like a chemist in the feed room, those kinds of things, making up all your baggies. I know y'all do it. So I used to work for a trainer, I had to do that, so I understand. So again, we're looking at lifestyle and age. What are you doing with your horse? Level of activity. Most of us overestimate how much we're actually working our horses. So when you're looking on the feed tag and it says light working, moderate working, heavy working, sometimes we're like, well, I ride my horse and he sweats when I ride, so moderate working. Not so, okay? Generally, if you're riding your horse only once a week, it's going to be into the maintenance category or light category. So generally, if you're riding your horse 5 to 6 days a week, then you're getting into the moderate to heavy. The heavy, hard-working performance horse is like a racehorse. So we got to kind of take it back a little bit notch. Most horses fall under maintenance to light working. Okay? Even if you're going to shows, it just kind of, they tend to fall under that. So your hay can actually dictate what you're doing on the other end. So if you are feeding really good quality hay, a lot of times you don't have to feed a lot of grain and supplements. Okay? And if you going back to body condition scoring and evaluating protein and looking at your horse and what do you really need. If you feed kind of poor quality hay or moderate quality hay, so you got a really good deal on the farmer and it's local hay, that's okay. Just know then you might have to feed more on the other end. Okay? So what I find too often that is when we get a really good deal on hay and we buy kind of cheap hay, maybe it doesn't do that great for our horse, so now you're going to spend more money on the grain side. Okay? Or vice versa, maybe you got a really nice batch of alfalfa blend mixed with a little bit of grass and your horse is doing amazing on it, so maybe you only need like a little supplement. So, you know, you just kind of know that your hay is going to dictate what else you're doing on the other end. And then if you need anything else. So these are some of the questions that I usually ask people, so some of the questions to know yourself. Does your horse maintain weight on forage alone? Okay, again, that would be an easy keeper if you say yes. If you say no, I feed him a ton of forage and he's still skinny, then no. What sort of energy do you need or want from your horse? Okay, we talked about energy requirements and what type of energy. Do you want more? Do you need more excited energy? Do you need kind of more endurance? Like say you're going to shows or you're going out for long trail rides and your horse kind of poops out at the end. Like what kind of energy do you need out of your horse? How much and what type of work does your horse do? Okay, we talked about that earlier. And then any issues or special needs. So feet problems, hair coat problems, muscle development, insulin resistance, you know, all those types of things that we can look into. So what I found after years and years of doing this is that most horses, and I'm talking about the West Coast, anybody here from other places of the country? Most of us are West Coasters. So out here in the West, and that's like Arizona over, okay, because I lived in California, Arizona, and Washington, and I also work in Oregon. We have really good forage. I mean, most of our horses get away with really good quality forage, really good pasture, except for in Arizona, we didn't have pasture, but we had really good forage. And so they don't need a whole lot of grain. When you go to the Midwest, like Missouri and Kansas, they're feeding, their horses are on pasture, but the hay quality is so low. I mean, they have to eat tons of hay, and most horses on average get 5 pounds of grain a day. On average. And out here, most of us don't even feed 5 pounds a day at all, right? And so it's very different the way that we feed out here. And so what I found that works most for most cases of horses is if you're not, not a huge performance horse, you're just feeding, on the higher end of the forage scale, so you're feeding them plenty of forage, good quality, and then a good ration balancer. And what a ration balancer does is it not only gives your horse the vitamins and minerals, but then the protein piece. So if you're looking for something and you think that maybe your horse needs the protein, that's a really good option. Okay. Now, if your horse doesn't need the protein, then you just need a good vitamin and mineral, and that's really easy too. But if when I was talking about the protein and showing you those areas on the horse, and you felt in your head, maybe my horse needs a little bit more protein, that's kind of the next step up. Okay, so I'm very conservative when it comes to feeding. So we feed hay, forage, the next step up would be vitamin and mineral, and then the next step up would be a good ration balance. And there's lots of them out there. I have a couple samples of ours in the back, which is called Enrich. But there's lots of them out there, depends on where you shop and all that kind of stuff. But so this is 1 pound. So most horse gets a pound a day. And you can split that into 2 feedings. This is a little 16-ounce cup, and you can kind of see it's a little pellet. This is really, really easy. Okay, this is what I fed my mare for years until she lost some teeth, and she's old now, so she's a senior. But this is really good. It actually puts top line, fills out hips, love it. Okay, now ours or another brand, it doesn't matter. Ration balancers are hands down one of the best ways to balance out horses' diet. Now from there, if that's not enough, that little 1 pound, I've had people laugh and go, my horse cannot maintain weight on 1 pound. They're feeding 4, 5, 6 pounds of grain or supplements or oil or rice. They're feeding more stuff to their horses, so then that means that their calorie requirement needs to be met. That means they're burning more calories, they're being worked a little harder, or they're just really hard keeper. So then you're going to feed more of something, calories, protein, and other nutrients to maintain body condition and endurance. Okay. Now generally, that easy keeper that we talked about, the one that's either on hay or hay and a ration balancer, they're generally need anywhere from 16 to 20,000 calories per day to maintain themselves. When we start working horses a little harder, they're up to 25 to 32,000 calories per day. And that's why we have to feed so much grain on this end, because they just really can't eat that much forage. So we have to feed them more grain to maintain it. And so keep that in mind. I mean, we require what, 2,000? Do all of us require 2,000? No. So these are kind of general standards that we're talking about here, but that's all we have to work with. So keep in mind that to get 1 pound of gain per day on your horse, so say you want your horse to gain weight, say he needs to gain 50 pounds, you can probably do that in about 50 days. Okay, generally you can get anywhere from a ½ pound to 1½ pound gain or loss per day. That's kind of average for horses. Okay, we've done a lot of studies on that. So generally average is about 1 pound per day. So you can't put 50 pounds on a horse in a week. Okay, you got to give your horse time. That's why generally we like to give a horse 60 days usually when we're changing something or trying to do something different. So keep in mind that it's an extra 5,000 calories per day to get 1 pound per day. So that's kind of a one to keep in mind, a rider downer, so that if your horse needs to lose weight or gain weight, so it can be lost as well. So if you know that your horse is currently getting 20,000 calories per day and he needs to lose weight, you might need to drop it down to 15 calories per day. Or the opposite, if he's getting 15 and you need to gain more, then we're going to bump it up to 20. Now that's in addition to whatever you're doing. So your horse, for instance, a performance horse, you have to take whatever he's getting right now and add 5,000 calories on top of what he's getting, right, to get 1 pound of gain. So that can be like 3 pounds of strategy, it can be 2½ pounds of Ultium. There's lots of things you can do. It's usually a couple pounds of something. Okay. Oh, and then electrolytes. If a horse is sweating, you need electrolytes. If your horse is not sweating, unless they have some other medical condition, they don't need electrolytes. I actually think we kind of overdo electrolytes because most of the time we just need salt. Okay? So if your horse is not sweating, then you just need good salt. Okay? If your horse is working hard and sweating, the only way you can replace the electrolytes lost in sweat is through the diet, so then you do an electrolyte. So if during the summer you're out, you're showing, you're working your horse and he's sweating, great, do an electrolyte. But if in the winter you don't ride at all and your horse is just kind of sitting in the stall and not doing anything, you don't need to continue to do that electrolyte. You just would want to switch him over to a salt. Okay? So I tell a lot of people that. A lot of people don't know that. So a couple more things. Senior horses, how many has an old horse? Most of us do, yeah. You don't have an old horse yet, you probably will in a couple of years, right? If you hold on to them. So senior horse top breeds are pretty popular. They're usually not too different than regular horses, but as they age, their requirements change a little bit. We've done a lot of research on what is really going on in their body and what's changing, and their nutrient requirement does change a little bit. So I've talked about protein to death. You've probably realized that already. And so protein is really important as a horse ages because they actually don't require more protein. They actually just can't digest and absorb protein as well as they used to. So basically their digestive tract and their gut kind of goes out on them a little bit. So we actually have to feed them more protein just to get them to digest more or absorb more. Think about it as like, so the hole to get protein in their gut, just think about it as a hole, used to be this big. So the protein passing through the gut needs to get absorbed and fall through. It's like marbles passing over. So now the hole's this big. So we need to have more marbles, more protein going through just to get more protein into them. So the requirement's not higher, but we feed them more to give them a better chance to absorb it because they have a hard time absorbing it than before. That's why usually you see old horses with the poor top line and their hips kind of poking out and the muscle going away. And that's because a lot of times we haven't changed their diet. We haven't increased the protein. Because we just didn't think to, but really we need more protein to build those places up. So this horse is kind of an old horse. He's kind of the look where you're like, it's kind of an old horse, and some people just think, well, that's the way old horses are meant to look. I don't believe that. I've seen lots of horses come back and look amazing. You don't have to just make this the exception. You say, well, horses are old, they're supposed to look like this. You actually can feed them appropriately so that they still look pretty amazing. Okay? So hay and forage, another big one we talked about a lot to death. They need hay and that for the microbes to keep on going, but a lot of times they can't chew hay or digest hay as well as they used to, right? So the first question I usually ask if your horse is older is, can he chew hay, right? My mare, for example, she's been on a ration bouncer for like 6 years. She was an easy keeper, okay? But just in the last 2 years, she started dropping hay, can't eat hay, lost a couple teeth, started to lose weight, first time in her life. And so then we got to move her over to something that has more digestible forage so that she can eat and still look good, okay? So that's why we always want to pay attention to teeth, especially as horses get older. And so you can utilize things like complete feeds. Complete feeds is a weird topic because a lot of people use the word complete very loosely. And as an industry standard, if you read something and it says a complete feed, it means that the forage is built into that diet. Okay? A lot of people think complete means it's complete with vitamins and minerals. In the industry, that's not so. So basically, complete means hay is built in, so that means hay is optional. So most senior diets, no matter what brand, is that type of feed. So that's why it's called senior, because it has the hay built into it, because your horse can't chew hay as well as used to. Okay? So typically a senior feed would be something you could feed 15 pounds of throughout the day and be fine. My mare gets 8 pounds of senior and like a half a flake morning and night to chew on. And she's a smaller horse, she works out pretty good. So keep that in mind. So alternative forages might be useful. Now if you have that easy keeper senior, then you might be okay. I tend to see as horses age, they go to the two extremes, right? They either get really overweight and they're really easy keepers because they're not being ridden as much, maybe they're not being used, so they're fat, or you have the other ones that are really getting skinny. So I usually don't find the middle of the road, I find the two extremes. I think you can feed them that way. You can utilize things with hay in it, with beef pulp in it, stuff like that. That's kind of usually the four sources that are a little bit more digestible. Also, a lot of senior feeds, like ours for instance, is really, it's a digestible pellet, so right when it hits the horse's mouth, it starts to dissolve. It's called like an easy soak pellet, because actually as horses get older, they can't produce as much saliva, and that's been proven too. So again, that's why older horses choke, high risk for choke. And now when they're chewing, they can hardly chew, and I just told you earlier that horses start salivating when they start chewing. But now older horses can't salivate as well. So we kind of have the odds stacked against them. So that's why moving to some of these types of feeds are actually beneficial for them, because it helps the digestion a little bit better and prevent choke. So most of the vitamins are the same, but I told you about vitamin C earlier, right? Your horse doesn't require vitamin C except for older horses, because we've done the studies where their level of vitamin C in their body is lower as the horse ages. Okay? So, and what is vitamin C important for? What's important for us? What do we like to use it for? What was it? Fight infections, yeah. Immunity, right? If you're getting sick, you load up on vitamin C, right? So as horses age, they can't produce as much vitamin C, so they're higher risk to getting sick, right? Their immunity is going to go lower. So that's why we actually add vitamin C to senior diets. So that's why it would be a little bit different than you would feed a senior horse just a regular horse diet, because we're making some changes. Also, phosphorus is the other one that is a little bit higher requirement for horses, so we tend to add a little bit more phosphorus. They're just not able to absorb it, just like protein, as much, so that's the other mineral that might be a little bit different. Others that typically we change with senior horses is starch and sugars and fat. So as horses age, they sometimes have less sensitivity to insulin and sugar, so they're more insulin resistant. Even if they're not having issues, sometimes they're just more sensitive to that. So we tend to lower the starch and sugars for those older horses. And because when we lower the starch and sugars, we're taking out those calories, we tend to add more fat in the way of fat calories, so oils and rice bran and flax seeds, to try to help that as well. Okay, so anytime you take away something for calories, you need to add something back in. You want to maintain that horse. So usually we're adding a little bit more fat to those types of diets. So usually fat and fiber is a little bit more of a better route to go for the older horses than the starches and the sugars. And so what I usually do with horse owners is we talk about, these stair steps. We talk about forage first, and then a vitamin mineral, and then you need protein, and then you need calories. Okay? So it's like moving up the scale. And then from there, you want to start with a good basic diet, a good balanced diet that you know you're meeting your horse's requirements. But then from there, you might need some other therapeutic doses of something. And so there's joints, there's electrolytes, there's pre and probiotics, there's hoof and coat conditioners. And I just want to make sure you pay attention to the basic nutrients first. So the protein, vitamins, and minerals that we talked about, those are a lot cheaper and a lot more effective to fill those buckets first before you go on to something therapeutic. So think about hoof, okay? If your horse has crappy hooves, and you're always struggling with the quality of his hooves, and so you're, I gotta go out and buy a hoof supplement and biotin and all this kind of stuff that people say is good for hooves, but your horse is still deficient in protein, your horse is never gonna have good hooves, because protein is the first bucket that you need to fill, okay? It's a whole lot cheaper to make sure you're getting protein than going out and buying an expensive biotin supplement. Now, with that being said, if you know your horse, you've worked with people, you know that your horse is meeting the protein requirement, is on a protein supplement, and he still has bad hooves, that means you need to go to a therapeutic dose of something. So the take-home message is do the basics first, and then move on. Too often than not, I see people just feeding hay, and then they complain about their horse's crappy hooves, and then they want to just go on and buy biotin. And biotin is very helpful for hoof quality, but only if everything else is in place, right? So we don't want to put a Band-Aid on it, we actually want it to fully heal, right? Electrolytes, I already talked about those. If you have a horse with ulcers, okay, electrolytes can actually make ulcers worse. So if your horse does have ulcers, anybody have a horse with ulcers? We can talk about it, but basically I can make it worse. So we have some new products. Actually, one of the ones we're raffling off is an electrolyte. It's encapsulated, so it actually is more gentle on the stomach if you have like a performance horse. Pre and probiotics I get asked about a lot. The thing about pre and probiotics is what it is trying to condition the gut, right? Now I just told you your horse has like millions and zillions of microbes in their gut, right? All these little bacteria, way more than we do. And there's actually been a lot of research coming out like this last year about these microbes, and we have hardly even identified a very small amount of them. There's so many of them in the horse's gut. And we're finding out that it's more related to their genes than to just the horse population in general. So your horse is more likely have a similar gut bacteria than its mother, than its mare, than the horse in the stall next to it. Okay? And so what that's interesting to know is that's why some probiotics don't work on your horse and some do. Because you're really trying to match up whatever supplement the probiotic has in it with your own horse's individual gut bacteria. So it might work, it might not. And the reason why I tell you this is because you try it and it works great. If you try it and it doesn't work, don't keep on feeding it, okay? Because it's not the right one for your horse. And generally a horse, okay, so probiotic, for definition, those are the actual bacteria that you're trying to replenish the gut. Okay, lactobacillus and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to replenish the good bacteria into the gut. So that can be helpful, depending on which one we're trying to match up. And that's really hard to do unless you're doing cultures and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes we're just kind of shooting in the dark, trying to make it work, and that's totally fine. This is not going to hurt your horse, okay? But a good, healthy horse that is thriving and has a good digestive tract doesn't need to be on one, okay? So keep that, it's a waste of money. If your horse is healthy, you don't need it. But if your horse is a chronic poor doer, has scours, you're working with your vet, I mean, you can always try it and it can help. But that's why sometimes you have people that swear by it and some people are like, it didn't work at all. Because it's really individualized to your horse. And then a prebiotic, I'm not so convinced about prebiotics yet, because prebiotics are actually fiber. Prebiotic means it's the food for the microbes. And as long as you're feeding really good forage to your horse, that is the fiber for the microbes. So I'm not really convinced yet that prebiotics are really doing a great job. Now again, some people try it, they love it. It really just depends on what's going on in the whole environment, what's going on in the horse's gut. But again, try them out, see them, but it's not always going to work for your individual horse. Okay?
I was wondering, when you worm your horses, is that killing the bacteria in their stomach also?
I don't know, no. You guys might know a little better, but no. I mean, it's a totally different drug. Bacteria is different than an intestinal parasite. So, now if you're on a horse with a lot of antibiotics, yes, just like us, you can kill off the bugs. So if your horse was on a huge round of antibiotics, and was maybe hospitalized or that kind of stuff, then yeah, probiotics could really work in that situation. But again, a good healthy horse, it's not like something you need to feed every single day. Just like us. Anything else? I know I've been talking for a while. Any questions you guys have?
Your line, you say senior, old, older. I mean,
What is a senior horse? Good question. And that's always debated. Generally, when you read the literatures and the books, they're going to say anywhere from 16 and older. It's considered a senior horse.
wow.
But I don't really believe that. Okay.
I have an antique that
Yeah.
32.
32. Amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, I met a 48-year-old horse the
And
other
he'll
day.
still scare the crap out of you.
Yeah. So what I usually say is when your horse starts showing signs of age. Okay, so that can be 20, it could be 22, it could be 27, it could be 30. So what is that? That is arthritis, it's poor digestion, teeth issues, glycemic response issues, just slowing down, those types of things. But literature says 16. Now when my mare was 16, you wouldn't even know she was that old. And so generally that's what the literature says. But again, 50 years ago, a 16-year-old horse was old. You know what I mean? When we used, 100 years ago, we were using them for buggies and plowing the fields. I mean, we wore them out. By the time they were 10,
sure.
they were retired. Now, horses are still competing in their 20s and doing things like that. So generally you can shift it. 20, is a good place to start considering it. But it also depends on how well the horse is taken care of in its life. So I don't know if you guys see this, but if you come across somebody who they have this old horse, and a lot of times I can tell if they've been a rescue case or not. Even if when I see them they're fine, but they just age quicker. So it's like us, if we drink and smoke cigarettes and our whole life, we're going to look a lot older later on than if we took care of ourselves. And I see that in horses. I'll sometimes ask people that if I'm visiting with somebody about an older horse, I'd be like, was this horse a rescue case? Like, was it starved at some point in its life and had to come back? And you're like, yeah. It's like, you can just see it for some reason. They just don't thrive as well in their older age. Versus a horse that you take care of its whole life. I've had my horse since she was 4. We were her first owner, past the breeder. We know her whole history. Other questions?
We're talking about alfalfa, and I had a question about that. Several people that I know don't believe in feeding alfalfa.
Yes.
They won't feed alfalfa.
Yes.
And some say that it's because it's not a natural food for the horse.
Yeah.
But other people do feed it, but then I'm wondering if you just fed it straight with nothing else, is that a problem? Or if it's with golden grass hay as a combo?
Great. So she's asking about alfalfa. Is it good? Is it bad? There are alfalfa haters out there. Okay. So alfalfa is a great forage that can be used in the diet. Okay. So saying that it's not natural, if a horse came across alfalfa, it's going to eat it. Just an alfalfa is a legume, just like a clover, and your horse eats clover, right? And so, generally alfalfa doesn't grow everywhere. So in these parts of the country, they might not find alfalfa naturally, but they would eat it. It is used. I think alfalfa can be used as a great tool in the diet. So it can be added to add calories. It can be used to add calcium, add more protein. Yeah, more protein. But we talked about that. But more calories. It's a great source of hay for calories. Now, if you feed 100% alfalfa, I'm actually not a fan of 100% of anything, to be honest. I like mixes because I think each hay bring different things to the party. But 100% alfalfa, you generally have really high calcium, really low phosphorus, which that can be a problem. We want to bring that closer. So you have to make sure you're supplementing for that. It's also usually a lot higher in protein. And as we talked about, all that protein is not utilized by the horse. So the horse has to urinate it out. So that's why if you go to a barn that they feed all alfalfa, it usually smells like urea or ammonia. It's because all those horses are on all alfalfa. And again, some people argue it could be about the horse's kidneys. Again, it depends on the horse's health in general. But alfalfa has been used, and it's proven now, it can help with ulcers. So it has about a 5 to 6 hour buffering effect on stomach ulcers. So for people that hate alfalfa, and they have a horse with ulcers, I really try to convince them to at least add a little bit of alfalfa to their horse's diet. Because it can, it came out a couple of years ago that we started talking about it, but now it's been proven, multiple research studies, that it does help. So it can be used in really good ways.
And if you have an older horse that can't eat, hay forage stuff, and feeding alfalfa pellets with people pellets.
Yeah. It can be used. I think alfalfa can be used in great ways. Don't be scared of it. And some people are scared of it because they think it's too high in sugar. And I know I gave that example before about the sugar in the alfalfa versus the grass hay. And so that's not always the case either.
So some grass hay are pretty high in sugar.
How would you know if your horse had ulcers?
Well, sometimes you don't know at all. But some horses are really good at hiding it. Some horses are a little cranky. Some horses, and the vets can probably chime in. Sometimes when you're riding them, they have like little issues like going to one way, or when you're asking them to do something. Sometimes it can be ulcers. Anything else?
Poor doer.
What was it?
A poor doer.
Yeah, a poor doer. Yeah. That's not like you're always trying to feed it, and it's not gaining weight. It's kind of something, and it's usually all of a sudden, you're like, I don't know why it's not gaining weight. Cranky, when you're cinching, performance issues, stuff like that. But again, these are really loose because sometimes you wouldn't even know. And sometimes horses have those clinical signs and they don't have ulcers too. So you really just have to scope it or talk with your vet. And sometimes you just treat it because a lot of times it's a whole lot easier just to treat it instead of scope it.
Is that more of an older horse situation?
No. Good question. It usually has to, this is such a generalization. It usually has to do with the amount of stress that the horse is under. But that again is huge generalization. But typically
training stress is environment stress.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing we want to be happy in their environment. That stress can be the horse they don't like living next door to them. It can be the horse that you bring in from pasture that's been out pasture for 10 years, who now is put into a barn environment.
Yeah.
So it's stress in every category, and we overlook environment stress a lot on our horses. It's not always about the training environment, which is what we used to think.
Now training horses do have a high level of it too. Yeah.
Exactly.
But it's mostly because they're under stress. I mean, they're being moved from barn to barn, traveling, putting the horse in a trailer. We actually done some research on that. That can, just putting a horse in a trailer and traveling somewhere can cause ulcers. Doesn't mean it's going to last, the ulcers are going to last forever, but it can cause ulcers. I was working with a barn once that they had two sides of the barn. One side of the barn, the horses, almost all of them had ulcers, and the whole other side didn't. And it was because that side of the barn was against this freeway. There was tons of traffic and kids that would get out of school and like tease the horses. And the other side was like overlooked a nice like serene lake. Like really, that was like what it came down to. And these horses, any horse that was ever on that side of the barn did worse. So kind of weird. So again, it's more stress and those kinds of things. But yeah, so keep that in mind. Pasture turnout is great for horses with ulcers. Alfalfa, low starch and sugar, those kinds of things.
Is it true that race horses are almost exclusively fed Timothy hay and why?
No, most of them are fed a lot of alfalfa actually. So I don't know where you heard that, but most, some of them get fed Timothy. I guess it depends on the horse, but most of them get almost all alfalfa. They have big balls of alfalfa and hay nets out of all their barns. And oats and grain. Generally, they're on a 50-50 diet. So they're on like 50% grain, 50% hay. Doesn't have to be Timothy, no. Usually it's alfalfa. Because they have to eat so much to maintain their calorie requirement, and alfalfa has more calories. So, great.
This is a question about older horses.
Okay.
I'm getting graphic, but I got an older horse that in the wintertime, he has kind of gaseous diarrhea.
Yeah.
In the summertime, when the grass, he's not for now all the time, but in the summer when the grass is up and he gets enough fresh grass, it goes away. But in the wintertime, here it comes again, and I got nasty legs, and
Yeah.
he actually does fine, but I've always had this mess in the wintertime.
Are you
It
always
doesn't seem to quite
getting into it? Yeah. Do you feed orchard grass in the winter?
I do because he's old and it's soft and
Yeah.
and I supplement him with alfalfa pellets and so that's
Okay. I would play around with the types of forages that you're feeding first, so it's a baby step. You guys have probably seen like the whole orchard phenomenon. Some horses just don't do well on orchard, especially through the winter. They get scours, no matter what their age. Since I moved here, it's like only in this Pacific Northwest. And it's like, it drives me crazy because I'm like, you don't see that anywhere else in the country. What's going on? And I've tested the orchard grasses, I've talked to veterinarians, I've talked to farmers, and nobody knows what the deal is because it's not every single horse. It's like a certain number of horses population. So one, I would try to maybe not feed orchard. That would be like a baby step to see if you can change it. So feed him Timothy or feed him more of a complete feed. I mean, if he's older, you can feed him more of a senior or more pellets or something like that. I have worked with some horses, no matter what their age, rebuilding their gut. We actually put them on like 100% complete feed for a couple weeks and then slowly bring back long stem diet, hay back into their diet to try to replenish kind of like the horses that have kind of worn out their gut and try to rebuild it that way along with some probiotics. Sometimes you can work on that. Depends on how far you want to go, but switching it out.
probiotics and even in the summer, I don't know a lot of pastures, so he gets orchard grass in them, or the hay, and it goes away. So
Yeah, it's
almost
probably
like
because
there's
you have a lot of
something in
pasture.
grass that like the more vitamin and whatever.
It probably has nothing to do with the vitamins. Yeah, it most likely has to do with the type of the fiber and what's ever going on with the orchard grass. Yeah, I would play
Sometimes
around.
we see it here because of the water. The standing water is becoming a huge problem. Because if you watch these horses, they drink water out
On the ground.
levels that's on the ground all the time. And it's actually a protozoal problem.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah,
we see it
sure.
there. No, but you don't really have
But
it.
if
So it
it's
doesn't
every
fit for
year,
there, but
yeah.
a lot of the places it's actually the water. It's them actually drinking out of their nastiness too. They create in their
Yeah.
guts in smaller areas too.
And if you weren't on orchard grass, I'd say try all these other things. But if you're on orchard, that's like the number one red flag that goes off first. Is like, well, I'm on orchard. Switch to something else and see. Yeah. These are all great questions.
A question about flax,
Flaxseed.
ground flax.
Yeah.
Some of the feeds now they're coming out and have a lot of flax in it. They say that it's high in omega-3s and
Correct.
all that stuff, and that looks really good. But some of my friends that have said that have had like some hormone-related issues with in horses, so I'm just asking, is flaxseed something to stay away from?
No, I mean, generally, I would think you have to feed quite a bit of flax to affect the hormone issue thing. But flaxseed is high in omega-3s, and so is chia seeds. If you want to feed chia seeds to your horses, you can do that too.
I was gonna ask what else was okay.
Yeah, chia seeds is a little more expensive. But so generally our horses' diets are high in omega-6 and very low in omega-3, and so we're trying to bring that ratio a little bit closer together because it's a little healthier. Also, omega-3s help with anti-inflammatory, so older horses, that's why it's good for older horses and things like that. So generally it has a good benefit. I think it has more of a good benefit than a bad benefit in that instance.
I have a mid-aged horse.
A what?
Mid-aged horse, he's 12.
Mid-age, sorry.
And he looks at grain and
Gets
just
fat.
gets fat. So I've been feeding him coconut and he's done really, really well on it. Can't get me.
Yeah.
Is there something that you can suggest that's,
So you were just feeding him coconut, like the coconut supplement, like
it's ground coconut, it's a feed that comes from Australia. I can't get it.
Right.
And so I'm looking for, because he's on pasture and he's on local pay. And I want to make sure that he's getting the vitamins and minerals he needs.
Yeah.
I can't feed him like regular grain because
Right.
it just blows up.
Right. So how much of the coconut were you feeding?
He gets about a pound a day.
Okay. Yeah. So in that case, when you have those easy keepers, you just need to make sure he's getting the vitamins and the minerals and the protein. There's probably some protein coming from the coconut, but like what I mentioned, the ration balancer type things would be really good for a horse like that. And you'd probably keep him nice and shiny and keep his hair coat really nice. So that's what I would do in a case like that. Yeah. And I have a couple samples, like I said. So if you think your horse is a category for a ration balancer, you're welcome to take one in the back. And it's one day's ration, but you know, it's not like it's gonna feed your horse, but you can kind of see what it looks like and keep the scooch. I think we're gonna do the raffle. I think she's gonna do it right now and bring it out. The thing I wanted to note, I have a handout in the back that just kind of talks about some basics, and then the brochure in the back, this one actually has body condition scoring in it, so it's a good take home. And then it also has a lot of good information on what to feed your horse and what. Then that start sheet that I had up is also in here on page 39, so that's also a good take-home one. This is a nice little booklet. There's also one, I have a few on the senior, so if you have a senior, pick that one up on the senior care. My cards are also in the back. You're welcome to call me. I work with Tacoma Equine, and you guys can call me. I do make farm calls and can come out and see your horse too if you need me to, or have any questions. I also brought, if you guys do feed or want anything, I have $5 off coupons. You're welcome to grab one. Just make sure to fill it out before you leave, and you just tear it. So if you want, I can pass them out if you want them. They're $5 off. So.
Where's the closest,
Good question. We have bad distribution out here.
Yes.
Kippers, right?
Kippers?
Is that it?
King Bee.
King Feed?
King Feed
Okay.
on Mountain Highway.
What was your question? What was the question?
Feed stores.
I think Dell's
Dell's
has
carries
some of it.
Dell's carries it.
King Feed
King
carries
Feed and Kippers. Kippers I was on the side, but
Are you at Sumner Animal Grove?
Sumner? Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he carries,
I don't know.
but depends on how far you guys are coming out. What?
Sumner
doesn't.
Dell's cars?
Dell's and King Feed definitely do.
Yeah, Dell's has a limited selection.
Yeah.
They have some.
Limited, yeah.
I have a question on your enrich. What are processed grain byproducts?
Good question. I love the
First
first
thing in
Yeah.
there. What
So
is it?
when so the grain industry is different than like the dog food industry, and a lot of times we match those together. And so when you look at a dog food, I have dogs, so I totally understand. And you look at byproducts, a lot of times you know that indicates beets
it's a
and
bad
feet
connotation, like,
and blah,
what do you mean
right?
as byproduct?
Yeah.
What is
So in the grain industry, so the grain manufacturing industry, when you look at anything that says byproducts, it's actually a byproduct of the human industry. So a grain byproduct, when you classify all those different ingredients, would be beet pulp, rice bran. Those are all grain byproducts. Actually, well, beet pulp is a forage byproduct. So what it is the sugar beet industry, right? For humans, we take the sugar from the beets, and then we have this pulp left over. That's classified a byproduct.
Okay.
And then
So-
rice bran is a byproduct because we're actually taking the bran off the rice, and we're eating the rice, but the bran's left over and that's going to feed animals, so that's a
Well,
byproduct.
that was in the original,
Yes,
it's bran, rice bran?
it's rice bran.
When it says byproducts?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why making, doing with allergy horses, why this game is so hard to play.
Yes.
Because you deal with byproduct, and that can be any byproduct.
Yes, it's not as, yeah, I think the dog world gets a little bit like, and then it passes on to the horse world, so, yeah.
Flags go up.
It does, I totally understand, yeah. You were asking?
Well, can you discuss molasses? It seems a lot of companies just throw it in there.
Yeah, molasses has been used in feeds for a very long time. The reason why molasses is used, and I'll get into the different types of molasses in a second, but it's used in most feeds, and it's been less and less. But it keeps, what it actually does is it actually keeps the feed more liquefied, keep the dust down. That's originally why it was added to feeds, is to keep the dust down, because when you're doing all these dry grains, the dust flies and then there's more fines, and you guys don't like to find fines in your feeds, and so they add a little bit of that moisture to add to it. I know it depends on what feed company you're talking about. Some use straight cane molasses, which is more of that sticky molasses. Our company, for instance, we use actually oil blended with a little bit of molasses for flavor, so it's more of a molasses flavored oil, so it's less sugary. It just depends on the feed company. And usually feed companies change the molasses in the wintertime, because the wintertime, it gets colder, so they usually decrease the molasses in the wintertime, or else the things get brick up and stuff like that. So it really just depends. There's some feeds that don't have it at all. Those are going to usually be your drier pellets. So it's usually added to keep the fines down, and then it's not as much so more because we use some other flavoring agents, but it traditionally, and we're talking about hundreds of years, it's been used as a flavoring agent as well.
What's the
Wasn't it
oil?
also a fire
It's a
retardant?
soy oil. What?
Also a fire retardant?
Yeah, I mean to keep the fines down when the feed in the feed mill. So feed mills, if you've ever been to one, so we have one in Portland and one in Spokane. Huge fire,
Sure.
issues in all the particles and stuff in the air. So they usually have to add either an oil or some type of molasses to keep all of that down.
Is there nutrition in the soy oil?
There's oil with calories. That's usually adding some of the fat to the
So
oil.
it's good oil.
It's not mineral oil or anything like that.
So soy, you said soy oil.
Yeah, it's usually soy oil, unless it states different. Vegetable oil.
Could you touch on fresh fruit for a minute?
Fresh fruit.
Apples, pears?
Oh, okay. I was just at a bar yesterday. A woman was giving her horse a banana.
Well,
so.
I have apple and pear trees,
Yeah.
and horses can each
Yeah.
themselves.
So again, everything in moderation. A couple apples, a couple carrots, whatever is fine. Again, if your horse is insulin resistant or you're dealing with some really issues, then you might want to stay away because there's some sugar in those kinds of things. But there's also fiber, just like, it's the better sugar because it's coming with fiber. Now, with that being said, just a few, right? We don't want to overdo it.
Right.
And any change, if they're going to eat a lot at once, could overdo the gut, right? And any change, say they got into the orchard and ate a bunch at once.
Sure.
I had one lady once asked me about carrots, and I said, oh, a couple carrots a day is fine. And she said, well, she fed 5 pounds of carrots a day.
Yikes.
So, that would probably not be appropriate, but again, so that's why I touched on it. Fruit's fine. I was out seeing a woman out in Kirkland, and she was giving her horse bananas because he really likes bananas.
The banana inside is fine, the peel is not.
No, yeah,
The peel is extremely
Yeah,
toxic.
she's
It's
like-
a goat, sheep, cow, like that. The horses cannot digest vines.
Yeah.
Something water.
Nor should anything
on
eat
one.
yeah.
They don't do well with the line, so.
Well, our trees are negated pastures, so
Okay.
we can control.
Yeah, so if
that.
they're falling on the ground and you're feeding them,
They don't have time to hit the ground.
yeah.
Run from the other end of the pasture to get an apple that's fallen.
Yeah.
Can a horse be allergic to grain? We just got one from Equest Special Riders
Yeah.
that they said was allergic to grain, but it needs to gain some weight.
Okay,
what
so,
do you do to
yeah,
get
her question
weight
is,
off?
can a horse be allergic to grain? And yes, a horse can be allergic to a lot of different things. Grain is a very wide topic though, so I would be a little bit more specific in maybe doing an allergy test with your vet or something like that to know which grains. I mean, it could be just oats, it could be just corn, it could be soybean, it could be none of those, it could be a random one. So it could be wheat. There's a lot of different grains out there. But if they say grain particularly, then you might be able to do fats. You might be able to utilize some alfalfa. And those kinds of things. And horses can be allergic to hay too. So there's a lot of issues with horses if they're allergic. But yes, that's true. You just might need to get a little more specific about what's, because if they're only allergic to one grain, then there's a lot of
See, we don't know because we just got it, but its ribs are showing a little bit.
What I would do if you don't want to get a test is you can, it's just like you would with a human, like so you do an elimination diet and you add things back in. So add 1 grain and see, add another one. You can do it that way too. But I would say work with your vet.
What about allergies? So you might be surprised at your horses whether they're allergic, because I sure was. I had one of those did the allergy test, and the horse is allergic to just about everything. The horse is like, allergic to apples, carrots, alfalfa, orchard grass hay.
Those are the fun
I'm
ones.
disappointed about the flaxseed and the feeds are using it so much, because flaxseed is actually a really common
Allergy.
food allergy in
Yeah.
horses. So for me, it's a food allergy.
It can
So-
be, yeah.
So for us on our professional side,
Mhm,
it's
you're
getting
like,
frustrating that it keeps popping up in all the grains lately. It's like, okay, yeah, because it's a common one we'll see that they'll test positive for flaxseed, and that's a hard one actually, because it's becoming such a common thing.
Yeah.
Because the whole theme of everything right now is, omega-3s
Omega-3s and
and
fats.
doing your anti-inflammatories and all those other things, which the hard thing of your guys' horses. Try to be picky about, don't start 3 new things at one time,
Yeah.
start one thing, and make sure that, that's not when your diarrhea starts, or the cough, or, my horse is itchy all of a sudden. Hives, we think hives a lot of times is actually contact, it's not, it's actually food. So, everything you guys start, try to start slow, one thing and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And the allergy testing, I know there's a lot of people out there who don't feel the blood works really, really well for us to test. And they do want you to go the more skin testing, which can be hard on a horse, and
Yeah.
we just don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah,
as often.
it's hard.
It is
Spot
hard.
tests are not 100%.
But it sure helps us eliminate
Gives
the
you-
really high big things, and all allergies are cumulative, so it's, they can handle 5 things pretty well, but it's that 10th allergy that then
Yeah.
they're going to break out in the hives, so.
Yeah, usually with a spot test, I tell people to look at the biggest, the high things.
Yeah, and
Eliminate those, and then, the other things, there's probably only 1 or 2 things on the list that's actually causing the reaction. It's probably not all of it. I would say that if all of us took a spot test, even if you don't have any clinical signs, you're probably all allergic to something.
You give
So-
me the idea of walking.
Yeah, so just, take it with a grain of salt. And then there's also environmental stuff too. But I noticed if your horse, if you didn't change anything, and your horse starts to get, issues, then a lot of times it's something else.
And it's going to happen pretty quick. Most of those things, those changes, you're going to notice in the first 6 to 8 weeks when you start something new. But that being said, once you figure out what it is, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to get it out of your body also. So sometimes there is a little patience level about once we know what they're allergic to, once you eliminate that, it can take a long time for that body to get back to normal. So,
Fun stuff. Yeah, when horses are allergic to a lot of things, it makes it difficult for you, me, your vet, all that fun stuff.
So all horse treats are about
Yeah.
based, so.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to pick up my card, take down my number, email me questions, all that kind of stuff. So we're good. If you want to, we can just, I think just pass these out. Gina, if you want to thank Gina for coming and on a Saturday afternoon.